Thank you very much. It is really a thrill to be here for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, because my son Connor's here in the audience, and I think it's the first time I've been able to have a chance to speak at any of the schools where my kids are. So, Connor, I hope I don't embarrass you too much. Second, I'm also really thrilled to be part of the first TEDx here at Leysen American School. It's such a special thing, this TEDx. And I thought I'd start, just to give you a little teaser, with this little quote from Bob Dylan, like a Rolling Stone, which many of you probably know. When you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. Remember that as I go through the rest of this presentation. As my introduction suggested, I'm the CEO of Logitech, so I work in the tech space, and I look around my peer group. If you're a student here, your peer group or other students, my peer group or other companies, the top of my class are the big companies that we all know. It's Apple, it's Microsoft, it's Google, Cisco. It's the really big companies that are regular everyday names in this country now and in the world. And it's really interesting because they have one thing in common, those four companies that I named, and many, many others that are at the top of the food chain, which is they have a lot of money, a lot of money. Apple, as of the end of 2015, had $206 billion. Microsoft had $108 billion. Alphabet, as it's now called, or Google, had about $67 billion, and I could go on. They're sitting on a pile of money. And you don't get that kind of money without sustained, amazing performance. Great leadership, great innovation, over time, it's very impressive. So you can't help but think, wow, money begets money. This is the way it works. Great, money actually unleashes more power. More power makes companies bigger. It's an amazing success story built off of the almighty currency, whatever it is, dollar, euro. And then there's the personal side of it. Let's face it, most of us, not all of us, most of us are driven by some kind of wealth accumulation, either as a measure of our success or as a desire to get somewhere and have freedom to do something. It's just the way the world works. And the assumption is that, by getting money, everything gets better and you get more comfortable. And it's probably true in some ways. But that's not the whole story. When I was growing up, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I won't pretend to be, a Horatio Alger story, as we'd say in the U.S., or I certainly wasn't poor by any stretch of the imagination relative to so many people in the world. But my parents divorced when I was 10 or 11 years old. My mother taught first grade. I had 3 siblings, so there were 4 of us. We almost never went out to eat. We certainly never didn't belong to a country club or anything like that. We didn't go to a boarding school like you have here. So we didn't have any of those advantages. In my school, I was probably in the lower quintile or maybe lower decile of the group of students there. And, I felt, it was challenging. I looked around at my peers and I said, wow, if I had what they had, God, imagine what I could do. And I really felt that way. I didn't resent it. It was kind of inspiring, but I really felt like, gosh, it's really, I've got to overcome a lot to get to where they are, and then I can start from there. But that was the wrong way to think about it. And I'm starting with a couple of examples from nature on why I think that's the wrong way to think about it. This is a bird of prey, it's a hawk. And if you've ever watched a hawk hunt, it's amazing. I mean, they're beautiful. They're strong, they're fast, they're responsive. They can turn very quickly. They're super, super athletic. They're some of the best athletes in the world are hawks. But there's one thing they all have in common before they hunt. You know what that is? They have to be hungry. If they're not hungry, they feel fat, they feel slow, they feel comfortable, they stay on their perch, they wait until they're almost at the point of starvation, then they jump out of the nest and they go hunt. And then they become these amazing athletes. So that's the animal kingdom. Let's look at the human kingdom. In the human world, we're not that different. There's a research now, and many of you have probably seen it over the last decade. This is the piece I pulled from was from USC in Southern California. It demonstrates that if we in this audience in this room were able to cut our calories to about 1,000 calories a day, right around there, we probably could. First of all, everything would improve. Every measure of your health would improve. Cardiovascular disease would drop like a rock. Cancers would not completely disappear, but they would dissipate. You would be extremely healthy. You'd be miserable. You'd be miserable. Nobody can, it's very difficult to combine 1,000 calories a day, but you would undoubtedly live longer. In fact, their estimates are 30 to 40 years longer, somewhere in the 100 to 120 year range. Now, we don't do that, but it's interesting that hunger has that kind of beneficial effect, just a beneficial effect from a pure health standpoint. Now, this is a picture by Vincent van Gogh, and the story of the starving artist is a cliche. I thought it was a cliche. As you do a little more research, you realize, actually, it's not a cliche. If you go through and look at the history of artists and writers, you'll find a disproportionate number who were literally hungry. And Vincent van Gogh's an interesting example. You know what his average caloric intake, by the estimates, based on his journals, his average caloric intake, first of all, the average adult male is about 2,400, 2,500 calories. His was about 1,260. Now, by any measure, he was miserable. He ended up committing suicide, cut his own ear off. So I don't recommend that we go to that level of starvation. But it shows you the power of hunger in creativity. Now let's move out of literal hunger into figurative hunger. Figurative hunger, what does that mean? That means the desire to get somewhere, to do something, to reach a new place. I put a picture here of the most recent example I could find of a big, amazing story where the faster, bigger, stronger, more successful team, the South African team in the 2015 Rugby World Cup, lost to the smaller, underrated, underestimated Japanese team. Why did they win? They were hungry for victory. They were hungry. Now let me go back to my business world again for a minute. If you go back to 1955, so before 1960, there was a thing called the Fortune 500 then. How many people have heard of the Fortune 500? Okay, it's still around today. That's why you heard of it. Well, the Fortune 500 are the 500 biggest companies in the U.S. Well, those 500 biggest companies in 1955 were some big names. Today, 70 years later, there are only 61 of those Fortune 500 that are still there. They were the Microsofts, the Googles or Alphabets, the Oracles. They were these companies that day, and only 88% of them are gone. 88%. Where did they go? Why did they disappear? Because they were comfortable. Maybe they had too much cash. Maybe they were too afraid to lose. They had too much to lose. So back again to our big companies that I talked about at the beginning. So I started by saying, guys, these are these big, powerful companies that clearly demonstrate that money is a clear driver of success in business, right? And in your personal life, maybe, depending on your profession. Well, what I'm here to tell you is, it's interesting because in my world, people look at these really big companies, not just these, but all big companies, and they say, where's the best practice today? It's from the big company A, or big company B, or big company C. And the medium-sized and small companies try to apply these best practices from the big companies. I think that's completely the wrong way to think about it. The truth is, I think these are exceptions to the rule. The fact that they have accumulated so much cash and have not stumbled or fallen is actually an example of what not to do. They've managed to do it, and they're tremendously successful. I would even say Apple's not an exception to the rule. At least I'd assert that. I don't know the Apple story as well as many people do. Certainly nobody in Apple. But here's a hypothesis. When Steve Jobs came back into Apple, it's not such a little-known fact anymore, that they were in dire straits. And he actually had to go to Microsoft, who was kind of his archenemy, and borrow $150 million just to make the next big innovation happen. So he was hungry. And then I don't know, and God rest his soul. I mean, he at some point, not too far after that, he must have found out he was sick. He must have felt the limit of time inside him somewhere. And certainly later, probably very overtly. And I'm sure having that constraint facing him drove him to feel like he had to have a bigger impact faster. And there's no denying that Apple's the most successful company in the world over the last, Apple or Google or a couple of these companies are the most successful in the world, and Apple certainly belongs up there. The others, I would say, I don't know their story as well. Somehow they've managed to keep this hunger gene going. So I believe that hunger is an absolutely crucial ingredient to a great life and a great business. And I'll tell you that if you go to school here, if you grew up comfortable, and many of you didn't who go to school here, but if you did, you've got a disadvantage. You're starting from a tougher place than I did. I had a big advantage over you. I didn't have a choice. I had to work like crazy to get there. It was easy for me. It's much harder if you don't have that situation, if you have a family with money, if you have a family business, if you have all the comforts that come with that. Shouldn't scare you for a second, because you can deal with that. It's about a mindset, and I want to talk about that for the rest of this talk, very briefly. So I have just 3 things to talk about. I will tell you they're completely overlapping. They're mixed together. I don't have all the answers. I'm always looking for them. I think this is such an incredibly important thing for all of us. No matter how you grew up, wherever you are in your life, you feel this. Trust me. You feel the moment, I'm too comfortable. I'm not willing to take chances anymore. Sometimes it happens when you're 17 or 18. Sometimes it happens when you're 53. My first principle is be small. Don't ever let yourself think you're any bigger than you are. You're not. You're really small. You're tiny. You're this little thing on this planet Earth. You may have gotten the best grade in the class, or you may have gotten into the best university, but you're tiny. You be humble. Stay humble all the time. In my company, what does that mean? I don't compare myself with the big companies. I compare myself with a startup. My whole mentality is Logitech needs to feel and act like a very small company. We have $2 billion in revenue, and we're going to be the smallest company we can possibly be with $2 billion. We've eliminated layers of management. We have no more offices. Nobody has an office. We fly everybody around the world coach. So this is the first one, is try to be small. Second one, create your own hunger. How do you do that? That's an easy thing to say, hard to do. I don't have all the answers, as I said, but I'll give you a couple suggestions. First one is, what is hunger? Hunger is an emptiness in the stomach. Your body tells you you need to fill it up, and then you have to act. So if you don't have, if it's not a biological hunger, how can you create that hunger in your life? Goals. Set goals. Even if you're not sure whether you want to do those goals, set those goals. They will create a gap for you. They'll create an empty stomach. You'll want to fill them. If you set them too high, you'll give up on them. If you set them too low, you'll meet them quickly, and you better set some more. All your life, set goals. Find competitors. Not necessarily competitors you're trying to beat, but competitors who inspire you. Competitors who do things that are amazing. Competitors you say, well, I'd like to be like that. And I know they're better than me at this or that or the other thing. If they can do it, I can do it, or at least I'm going to try to do it. Be the Japanese team in every class you have. Be the Japanese team in every job you have. Now the last one, and I'm going to play this video. Many of you may have seen it. I just thought it was a really good way to close my little TED Talk. And I titled it exactly what the video is, which is about clean your slate. And what this is about is don't let yourself not do anything that you think you can do or might be able to do or should do. Don't hold back. And when you find yourself there, clean your slate and start over again. Let's play that video.
I was afraid, I guess, of failing, maybe.
I regret all the time I wasted, not saying yes to things.
It's something I've always wanted to do since I was little.
Time slipping away, I mean, that's probably the worst feeling in the world, right?
I've got loads of friends from different walks of life, and it's really hard to keep in touch with everyone.
Up until recently, I was homeless. If I hadn't hurt the people that I had, maybe I wouldn't have been.
I wanted to do so many things, but I could never seem to find the time.
I did all the things that were like plan B. I just never did it.
right, go. Enjoy.
A clean board feels like where I want to be. Feels like where I want to go.
That it's not my regret anymore.
It's hopeful. It means there's possibility.
I want to close by saying, it's my presentation. The intention is to say just one thing, really, which is you've got to find a way to stay hungry, no matter how you grew up. I mean, I gave my personal example. It doesn't really matter because we're all in the same boat. In your life, you're going to run into spots where you feel full, you feel satisfied, you feel comfortable. You're afraid to take chances. It's too difficult. It's too hard. Whatever it is. But you got to stay hungry. Find your way. Find your comparisons. Find yourself small. Remember, I'll close with one other little story. In the Roman Empire, when the Roman emperors, which lasted 800 years, by the way, not bad. When the Roman emperor would go down the middle of the streets, and the crowds would be cheering him, and it was always a him, unfortunately, but the crowds would be cheering him left and right. He had a person sitting next to him all the time, a young person saying, "You're nothing. You're worthless. You're absolutely nothing." All in an attempt to make him feel small and help create the hunger that would disappear if he thought he was too big. Thank you very much.